My name is Jordan Pace. I'm the new chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and many of our members are here. We're here. Thank y'all for coming out today. We're here to talk about our legislative agenda, legislative priorities for 2025. So I handed out copies of it for y'all to keep. Pretty simple. Here's, well, I'll tell you what, before we get into the legislative matters, I do want to address something. Obviously, last week we got a further ensconced supermajority here in the State House. The House grew its supermajority of Republicans. The Senate officially has a supermajority of Republicans. And it's our opinion that the rules of the House should reflect that mandate of a supermajority. The sad reality is, in the past, the last session, we had Democrats as subcommittee chairmen on very, very powerful committees in Ways and Means, Judiciary, and LCI. So our hope is that when we establish the new House rules, that it will reflect the mandate that the people have said and only have Republicans as subcommittee chairs and committee chairs. So let's start with that. But legislatively, none of this stuff is going to be too unfamiliar, I don't think, for y'all. Most of it was on our agenda last year. A lot of this legislation has been filed for decades. Well, we'll start with illegal immigration. It's our expectation is the Trump administration will have a very different tact on immigration enforcement than the previous administration, the current one. That's a great thing. What we can do here in the state, on the state level, is make it, decrease the incentives for illegal immigrants to stay in South Carolina. And that means various different ways we're going to do that, various different bills, but not reward people for being here illegally. We have a major insurance crisis in the state, as many of y'all know. I've written stories about. Bars, restaurants are closing by the hundreds. People are losing jobs by the thousands. And now this is starting to bleed over beyond just bars and restaurants and the tourism industry, but even into manufacturing, into delivering. Any business that has a fleet has seen a dramatic increase in liability costs and their insurance. Insurance companies are fleeing the state, and it's because of this joint several insurance problem that the legislature created, specifically created by a handful of lawyer legislators that wrote these bills and elected judges. That is something we're going to address. We're going to write legislation, bring back legislation to continue this march toward actual judicial reform. This is part of this process. Education freedom for all. We passed a very, very small school choice bill 2 years ago. Obviously, that ran into some trouble in the Supreme Court. We're going to bring legislation to address that and make it so the taxpayers, the tax money of families gets directed by those families and not government bureaucrats. Closed primaries. Now, this is one of those that's been filed, as far as I can tell, for at least 20 years. It's gotten virtually none, if maybe none at all, as far as subcommittee hearings go. The only time it's even had a breath of life is on the floor through amendments. Obviously, this goes back to the mandate of the supermajority. Only Republicans should vote in Republican primaries. Only Democrats should vote in Democrat primaries. The Republican electorate has supported this overwhelmingly in ballot questions in the last two primaries. And it's something that needs to be done, and honestly goes back to those rules we talked about earlier. We got to fix our roads. This is something we all hear about every time we go to the doors. Why are the roads such a mess? We raised the gas tax 10 years ago, supposedly to fix the roads and bridges. Now, hundreds of millions, more than $1 billion by my calculations, has been collected. We're still hearing the same problems. Why is that? Well, it's not a money issue. That's what we said 10 years ago. Many of us campaigned against raising that gas tax. It's not a money issue. It's a governance issue. SODOT should be held accountable by the voters, whether that be put the lieutenant governor in charge or have it directly elected. On top of that, South Carolina DOT has too many roads to maintain. No matter how good they are, even if we fix the governance issue, it's simply too many roads. The counties, by and large, can do it better, faster, and cheaper. So deregulating that to a great extent and pushing those roads, along with the funding for those roads, down to the counties will fix the issue, and we'll bring that legislation as well. Stopping DEI in South Carolina. This is a good start bill. Was passed by the House last year. Sadly, it wasn't passed by the Senate. We want to take that further. That needs to be in every state agency, not just higher ed. We're seeing the private sector do the same thing, whether it's Boeing, MIT, got rid of theirs. The University of Chapel Hill got rid of their DEI office. It is counterproductive and a waste of taxpayer money. Reducing South Carolina's tax burden. We hear a lot about record-breaking tax cuts. Read between the lines of that, it's 0.1% a year, which is record-breaking, and that's sad. That's not where we need to be. It's 0.1%. We need to be 1% a year until it's gone. So reducing the tax burden also means reducing spending. We had good news out of Louisiana earlier this week where they cut their budget. Not just to cut the increase, they actually cut their budget. This affects all the states. This affects federal government. The only way to get around this inflation that we keep seeing, and obviously CPI went up more than expected, that news came out yesterday as well, is to cut government spending across the board, state and federal. And then finally, to protect every unborn child. This is something that thus far has not made it onto the House Republican agenda. Maybe they'll change that. I hope they do. But protecting every unborn child, every innocent life is a priority for us. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Can you
Yeah.
first introduce all the new members of the Freedom Caucus that
Sure.
are here today?
Yeah, and this isn't everybody. Obviously, we're not in session. People got other things they're taking care of, especially new people are organizing their lives to get ready for the crazy. But this is Lee. He's from Anderson. Lee Gilreath. We got Chris Huff, standing right next to him. Jackie Terrabill. Get that right? Yeah, it's from Fort Mill, Rock Hill area, York County. Who's behind me? Stephen from Greenville. Stephen Frank from Greenville County. We have a few more too that aren't quite here yet. That aren't obviously couldn't make it, but yeah, we're going to have more than we had this past session.
How many new members do we have?
We're still locking that in.
Are any of your potential members over at the Alumni Center right now with the Caucus?
I don't know.
Yeah, I want to ask about
Sure.
that because I know that I believe Representative Ramus was both a member of the House Judicial Caucus and the Freedom Caucus. Is that still?
Yes.
Brady?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's right now the only member of the Freedom Caucus that is also a member of the House Judicial Caucus?
To my knowledge, yeah.
And then I know we discussed this the other day,
Sure.
but how many members as a whole total are you looking at having in the next session?
Somewhere between 20, 21, 22. We're still locking that in.
You mentioned some priorities of yours, including abortion, that obviously in the past there's been issues between the House and the Senate. Curious now, given the new makeup of that Senate, whether you feel like this is an opportunity to actually get that legislation through both bodies in the way that you're looking at a very restricted ban.
Very restricted ban. I don't know if I cloaked it in that terms, but we want to protect every life we can in any way we can. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think the voters in South Carolina were very clear when it comes to life. When you have 3 senators that lost their race solely based on their stand with the Democrats when it comes to life. And I think that should speak to the current Senate. They gained a supermajority, and there's nothing that we can't do for the people of South Carolina, but the most pressing thing should be for life always.
On your education platform, given the Supreme Court's decision with the Education Scholarship Trust Program, obviously there's been discussion of what approach the legislature takes, whether it's to pass the same bill or a similar bill but with a different court makeup,
Sure.
pass a referendum. I mean, what approach do you all want the legislature to do?
Look, I filed a bill 2 years ago before we passed the ESA bill about refundable tax credits, which is very similar to what Oklahoma does. Oklahoma has a Blaine Amendment. It seems to have passed constitutional muster there. So I'm hoping to file that again. Again, it's a refundable tax credit. I think we're all on board with an all of the above approach. We want South Carolina to be the most free market education state we can, and give parents the most options that they can get to educate their kids, because it's not a one-size-fits-all system.
As far as leveraging your membership, I know that's grown a little bit with the supermajority. Obviously, that gives you guys a little bit of leverage to work with the Republicans too. In that conversation, then probably need to pull from some Democratic support too, as far as legislative strategy. How you want to use your membership to maybe force leadership in a certain way. How do you plan to go about that?
I don't think our tactics are going to change a whole lot. We were going to put forward what we think is the most conservative policies that should pass and what the people want, and hold our ground on that. And if hopefully leadership comes along. They seem to have done that in several instances, whether it's the constitutional carry, on protecting unborn life. I mean, there's several instances where we're moving that needle. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But hopefully they'll be a little bit more cooperative with us, especially after this past June. I don't know how much they spent, $5 million, something like that against.
Still counting.
And still counting against trying to unseat our members, and all the ones that run for re-election got re-elected. So I'm hoping that will mean, hey, let's actually cooperate rather than have to fight each other all the time. Because all of these things, as the handout I just gave you, I attached where these priorities are in the Republican platform. So it's nothing that's new. It's everything in the Republican platform that we should all be in favor of.
I know there were a lot of remarks made about the way people looked at tinfoil hat last year. I'm wondering if there's been any kind of conversation with House leadership, like the Speaker's office, about decorum in the next legislative session.
Yeah, several of us went and met with the Speaker Pro Tem, the Majority Leader, back in September to talk about those issues. And we offered them, their ask to us was, come up with some new language to make everybody happy. We provided that. Thus far, we've heard nothing back. Obviously, they're meeting right now. And, we'll see if they change it. But we put forth several olive branches, and thus far have not been met with much reciprocation.
Were you
To the
expecting a
left.
change in leadership?
What's that? Oh,
Oh, I
Can we
was just
let it come
gonna,
back?
I was just gonna ask you last year, speaking of
Sure.
lack of unification, Republican Party, you said you guys have a lot of the same beliefs. What do you think led to that kind of division, and what are you guys gonna do to heal that rib?
well, like I said, we put several olive branches out. Sadly, in South Carolina politics, it's much more personal than it should be. On policy, these are all Republican platform issues. Like I was saying, like on policy, we should all be together. But it seems like more often than not, personal grudges or beefs or whatever get in the way of that. We're about policy. It's not a personal thing. We want the best thing for South Carolina. We want what the voters sent us here to do. This is all the stuff that we campaigned on and said we want to accomplish. So it's not a surprise. But we put those olive branches out. At this point, it's up to them if they want to reciprocate. We felt like we have done, the right thing in that regard.
And in that same regard, have you found that any of your policies don't align with them, or any of their policies that you don't agree with?
Well, like I said, on paper, we should all agree. In reality, though, when we're growing budgets every year by multiple percent, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, handing $1.3 billion in cash from the Treasury to essentially a foreign company to maybe build electric vehicles that aren't doing great on the market, right now. In practice is where the rubber meets the road. So I think we are making progress as far as like moving the needle to the direction the voters want it to go. But in practice, obviously we've had some conflicts. Most of that has to do with money and spending other people's money. We think we need to spend less of other people's money and take less of other people's money. I think that's where most of the conflict comes from.
And jumping on the budget question too.
Sure.
I know last year we focused mostly on like the smaller ticket items, going to statute and stuff like that. But you mentioned 1.5 billion specifically. Are we just talking about economic development spending? Or are we talking about actual programmatic cuts in the main departments? What are you guys doing?
Yes.
All the above?
In order to cuts to reduce how much taxes we're taking from people, you have to reduce the spending. And it's the spending that's driving the inflation, both on a state and a federal level. So I think we don't have a Doge department or whatever Elon's called it, but that's inspiring. Let's take a look. We're by the law, like by statute, we're supposed to have zero-based budgeting. Many of us have sat in on Ways and Means subcommittees. We're not on Ways and Means, obviously, but we sat in on them, and very obviously they're not doing zero-based budgeting. The agency comes in, says, here's all the great stuff we did, here's all the new stuff we want to do, and how much we think it's going to cost. Please give us more money. Not justifying where we spend all this money in the past. So, I think we're going to have a lot more discussion about that, maybe in committee, probably on the floor, and the more we dig, the more we find.
Oh, sure. And there's this number, 1.5 billion. Like it came from somewhere. Is there, any?
Yeah, that was a Scout deal. That was a Scout Motors
So it's
handout.
basically just based off of the Scout Motors.
Well, that was just the most egregious example. But you're talking about gummy bear statues. It's a small amount, but it's emblematic, right? That's not the only thing that the Arts Commission's forking out. I mean, we increased their budget by 50%, by $5 million, and that's where that discussion came out. It's about the government statutes, and it was catchy, it was funny, but the reality is that $5 million is going to a whole bunch of nonprofits around the state, non-government entities that are funded by the government, that I think most voters would be aghast that that's money taken out of their pocket and go into those organizations.
Gotcha. So it isn't like a target amount. It's just,
No, I mean, look, if we're going to cut the income tax by 1%, by my math, that's about $500 million, roughly. So, yeah, we got to start cutting.
okay. Jordan.
Hold on.
Were you expecting the change in the leadership of the Freedom Caucus to actually lead to better relationships with the House leadership?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, many of us have reached out separately. We reached out together to put those olive branches out there. Try to get past those personal past, conflicts. And at this point, it's up to them. But yeah, I hope so.
Speaking of previous leadership, one person I noticed was not here is RJ May. Have any of you had any contact with him recently? Any update you can share about RJ?
I haven't got anything to share with you. Obviously, there's several members that aren't here for various reasons. But
Is he included in that total number that you've given in terms of how many members you're going to have in the next legislative session?
what do you mean?
The 20 to 21 that you gave, is he
That-
included as a member?
That depends on, a lot of things.
And did he have any type of involvement in crafting some of these legislative priorities for the next session?
I have not talked with them in quite some time, if that
Does
answers.
anyone in the caucus talk to Representative May?
Beyond just personal, hey, how are you doing? I don't think so, no.
Do you expect him here on December 3rd?
We'll see. Probably know as much as I do.
Do you consider him a current member of the Freedom Caucus?
He's a current member of the House.
He's a current member of the House.
But is he a member of the caucus?
He's a current member of the House, and I'm curious why you're asking.
I didn't know if he was still in the caucus. or
Sure.
That's why I'm asking.
Why would,
Why would you say he's not? Just because he's not here?
Yeah.
There's a lot of members that aren't here.
somebody else had.
But as of now, within the 20 to 21 number, the expectation of who's going to be in the caucus
Sure.
for the legislative session, RJ is included in that number.
If he's a member of the House, and there's no reason to exclude him.
So yes.
He's an upstanding.
If he's a member of the House and he's an upstanding member of the, I'm curious why you're asking that.
Well, it's publicly available that he's been under investigation. That's been well reported already, right? We don't have it on record of what, but
Right.
we already know the documentation that the U.S. Attorney's Office has
Sure.
released. That's why we're asking if he is still a member of the caucus.
Okay. Well, we're here to talk about legislative priorities, first and foremost. So I'm happy to answer the questions about that. Whether who's here and why, I don't know the answer to all those things.
I do want to ask Representative White in particular, one, it's good to see
Sure.
you given your health, and I'm curious if you could give us a health update, but also, you led the charge on some of the judicial reform changes. I don't see that in this priority list, but I know that you talked about that you wanted to continue that conversation.
We do.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, last year, for the first time in the history of South Carolina, we included the executive branch in making decisions about who the judges are going to be. I mean, that's a long time to not include the executive branch, who's responsible for executing the law in the judicial selection process. So we did get a little bite out of that apple. And the bite we got out is that we will have 4 people now appointed by the governor to the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. We also increased the number of people that the Judicial Merit Selection Commission can vet out to the House and to the General Assembly to be voted on. So we'll now have 6 of those. If there's 6 eligible, we'll get to vote on 6 instead of just 3. So that's the first bite out of an apple that we need to eat the whole apple. We need to understand that legislators who are also attorneys should not be allowed to elect judges. It's the only place in America where we let legislators who are attorneys select the judges that they get to appear in front of. They need to either recuse themselves from the vote, or when they have a trial and they voted for one of these judges, recuse themselves from the trial. Lawyer legislators should not be allowed to plead cases in front of people that they elected, that they decide to pay for, and that they can fire. So we're going to keep on fighting that fight. We'll keep on wanting more people from the executive branch on the JMSC. And about my health, I was diagnosed on April the 22nd last year with esophageal cancer. I went to MD Anderson in Houston. I was treated for 7 weeks. I went back 2 months later. They checked me. They say I'm cancer-free. I go back on December the 16th to have another checkup. I'll be doing that every 3 months. And I just y'all need to tell all your listeners to keep on praying for me, that they'll keep on saying you're cancer-free. So I appreciate that question. Thank you.
I think someone over here.
On that note, I'm Jay Kilmartin, District 85. One of your questions is when you were asking if we disagree on how things should be fixed. I believe the House members, they're going to make a statement that they want to fix joint and several liability. And I just see a lot of lip service there. They're handing it off to lawyers who sue insurance companies for a living and make millions of dollars. And they're supposed to fix the insurance company crisis. So it's insane. I'm a restaurant owner. My insurance at my cigar shop went from $1,500 a year to $28,000. I had to turn in my beer and wine license. So it's really affecting a lot of businesses. And I don't know when they're going to wake up. I watched the Senate committee last week or 2 weeks ago, and they have a bunch of lawyers running the Insurance Commission, and the head of that committee said he doesn't want to hear a bunch of bar owners show up complaining about the cost of insurance. Well, I'm telling you, the margins aren't very big when you run a restaurant or what a past senator called a dive bar, and some of our music venues, they're going out of business left and right. I don't know, they're dragging their feet as they're making millions of dollars off these terrible insurance laws. So I hope they make that a priority. The conflict of interest is staggering when you're offering the people that caused this problem the ability to fix it. It's unbelievable, and we just need to keep pressing on the conflict of interest and just let the people know what's going on down here. So thanks.
Who's at the center of this problem? How do you fix it? What's the easiest way to fix this problem at the bar?
Recuse the lawyers. Yeah, they shouldn't be able to vote on things that make them money. They make the laws, they appoint the judges. I interviewed a judge 2 weeks ago, and he says he sees no problem. He knows all these guys that are running. He knows the House members, and I'm like, how do you not see the conflict there? It's amazing. So.
Are there any laws y'all can change to make it better for restaurant owners across the state that are suffering?
Yeah, get rid of joint and several. If somebody has a mimosa at my restaurant at 11 a.m., and that's all they have, and they're of age, and we do everything correctly, and they drink all day until 3 a.m., get in the car and kill somebody, the lawyers have figured out that I might be 1% responsible. Then they go insurance shopping, and they can hit, and I'm a franchisee, so I've got really good insurance. I have to have good insurance. They go insurance shopping. They sue my insurance company. And I just found out they can sue another bar's insurance company, and you're not allowed to tell them in court that they sued me as well. So the guy could have hit 10 bars and, raking in millions from each bar, whoever has a good insurance. It's unbelievable what they've gotten away with for so long. And I guess until their favorite dive bar goes out of business, they really don't care. So thanks.
With the new Senate majority, Senate Republican majority, I should say, have you had any conversations with some of the new Republican members or with some of the returning Republican senators about if a Freedom Caucus is going to form over there? If there's some thoughts or considerations that what you all started in the House a few years ago could now go over to the Senate?
Yeah, I hope so. No, we've had conversations. We've had conversations the last 2 years with folks over there. Obviously, there's people that are frustrated on that side of the chamber as well as us with the lack of movement. Hopefully, the results of last week will move that along in the right direction. So, yeah, we'll see.
You kind of touched on it previously before, but with new senators, do you think that we can get an abortion ban even more restricted than 6 weeks?
Why not? If it's the will of the people, they can pass the Scout Motor deal in 12 to 14 days. Why couldn't we fight for life? That matters. That's my question is, when you get here, who are you going to serve? And what's your purpose? But can they? Yeah. Should they? Yes. Will they? That's up to them.
What kind of legislation would you guys like to promote this legislative session coming up?
Well, what Jordan just pointed out. I think our roads, number one, illegal immigration, life, I think all of these are equally as important on different spectrums. But I think there's no reason why when we come in this session that we can't focus on the people we represent and figuring out ways to help them instead of helping the lobby.
And specifically, what kind of abortion ban are you guys looking for? From 0 weeks from conception?
I believe life begins at conception. And I think there's exception for the mother. But other than that, it's a life.
Too. But the other end of that too is, look, we have the FDA doesn't keep these stats, but in Europe they do with the over-the-counter abortion pills. We're not talking Plan B. We're talking about the ones people get by mail with no medical oversight at all. A lot of these stories that the Democrats rolled out over the last few months were just patently false, saying that women didn't have access to abortion care, they died. It was from the abortion pills. They didn't have any oversight of this, and according to the stats we get from Europe, they're very, very dangerous to the women, and they're not informed. So we've seen other states take a good stand on this to protect not only innocent babies but the innocent mothers who don't know what they're doing, and don't know what they're ingesting, and it's led to some of their deaths. Some of them are permanently, unable to have children. It leads to long-term complications. And nobody's telling. And instead, you get Planned Parenthood and these organizations just saying, no, there's no complications, there's no problem, you don't have to worry about it, it's fine, it's cheap, it's free, and that's a problem. Yeah.
So are we talking about like bans on selling Plan B, things like that?
No, I mean not specifically. Plan B is different. That's a whole different drug. We're talking about I can't pronounce their names. Start with an M. Both of them start with an M. I'm not a pharmacist, but the ones you get through the mail, the 2-part ones, I mean, they're only FDA approved for up to, I think, 6 weeks, and people are taking them deep into their pregnancies because they just don't know, and nobody's telling them. And it's very, very dangerous for those people, and obviously for the babies who are dying. So that's the other end of that too.
When you look at this past couple of years and all that the Freedom Caucus has gone through, any regrets, any learned lessons about how you all are going to proceed through this next legislative session have been different?
Think about that. So I wouldn't use the word regret. I think if we don't learn anything, then we're not doing it right. Obviously, we've taken a look, try to be as introspective as we can, but by all accounts, I think we're succeeding. We grew in our numbers despite overwhelmingly being outspent. We are moving the needle as far as like how the conservative legislation that's being passed. It's not where it needs to be, but for 15 years, 20 years, we were trying to get constitutional carry. It's not a perfect bill. It was going to be a whole lot worse. We stood our ground on that, and we got a better bill. So that's the lessons we've learned is, hey, stand firm on what the people believe in, what the people that sent you here believe in, and that's where we want to plant our flag and where we're going to stand. So we got one more question, and then
My last question is there any newly elected representative or someone who's even a freshman that would explain why they decided to pay line with the Freedom Caucus?
yeah, y'all go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Chris Huff. I'm from Southern Greenville County. I'm a lifelong Republican. I actually wore this pin in honor of my granddad today. That's all I've ever known as the Republican Party. My granddad died just a couple years ago at 97 years old. This pin is in honor of him. He received it the last year of his life. Lee's wearing another pin that he received that same year for donations that he made both to the state Republican caucus as well as the national Republican caucus. So Republican is, I've always voted Republican. My family's always voted Republican. I have absolutely no reason. Matter of fact, when I was first asked about running, when the discussions first happened, I said, guys, I reserve the right to join whatever caucus I believe. Your enemies are not my enemies just because they're your enemies. That's not how I function in life. 3 weeks into my run, the mailers that were going out against everybody else began going out against me, blatant lies about me, had absolutely nothing to do with who I am. Nobody from the Republican caucus bothered to call me, ask me who I am, ask me what I stood for. They didn't bother to ask me anything. They supported in a 5-way race, in a 5-way primary race in my territory. They supported a lady who has voted against President Trump in the previous presidential cycles, primaries. The only way we know that is because that means she voted Democrat. That's what you see. She also wrote a book with a chapter in the book entitled, literally entitled, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the Republican Caucus of South Carolina actually donated $4,500 to her campaign for her to run against me in District 28. So in the end, it's pretty hard for me to be excited about going over there and caucusing with people who did that to me without bothering to ask me a single question about who I am, what I believe, or what I stand for. These folks have been very inviting, very encouraging. All I can tell you is I agree with what they stand for. I believe with the policies that have been put forward. I agree with the principles that they've stood for. And I'm going to choose to caucus with people who are like-minded and people who focus on doing what's right for our constituents back at home, rather than figuring out ways that we can either make money for ourselves or for whoever it is donating to our campaign, or to get the next vote to work out. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for my constituents. And I'm not going to sign a piece of paper that takes my First Amendment rights away in order for me to be here and hang out with people and be a part of a club. I'm a Republican regardless of whether they invite me into their club or not. I will always be a Republican as long as the Republican platform continues to be what it is. I'm Chris Huff. Thank you, and we appreciate your time.
Stephen, you want to?
Yeah, I can say something. I'm Stephen Frank, District 20. Appreciate you all being out here today. I appreciate the question. There's been a lot of verbiage around this whole caucus war, how it started, tactics, and all this stuff. I can say, everybody's experience, I think, has been a little bit different. I'm a Republican. I've lived in Greenville County my entire life. When I decided to run for this seat, I had a lot of people reaching out to me excited that I was going to run. I know my district well. I've been there my whole life. And about a year ago, I talked to members in the House and Republican Party in both caucuses. Being new to the political scene, I didn't want to be a part of any kind of caucus war. I was just a Republican, wanted to represent my people in the state of South Carolina. But about a year ago, a representative for the speaker reached out to me, a friend of mine, and said, listen, we want to support you. You'll need a lot of resources to pull this off. Really like what you stand for and so forth. But I need you to text the speaker and let him know that you'll never join the Freedom Caucus. Not now, not ever, not going to vote for him. We need that in writing from you. And right there, drew the line in the sand. I said, this isn't what I'm about. This is not how it ought to be. This is not right. Besides being political suicide in my district, I said, I can't do this. We went back and forth for a couple weeks. I said, I'll join both caucuses. We're all Republicans. We ought to be able to cooperate and get along. That wasn't good enough. I had to put in writing and pick a side right then and there before I'd ever been elected. And so they backed me in the corner on that one. That wasn't me coming out with a hatchet in my hand. I come down here with no ill will. I want to work with all the Republicans because I'm a Republican, but I'm just not going to sign rules that's going to give up my First Amendment right, no matter how nuanced or slight it may seem. Out of principle, I'm not going to do that, but I hear they're talking about rules today. Hopefully they'll come to their senses and revert back to the old rules. And like every other state in the union, Republican caucus in the union, they don't have rules like this. We are an outlier in that regard. So we'll see what they decide. That's up to them. Would love to join with them, but the ball's in their court on that one. Thank you.